Welcome to Bedtime Horror, your portal to scary stories. It was a crisp autumn morning when me and my two friends, Mike and Lisa, decided to head into the forest for a hunting trip. We were eager for adventure and hoped to bag some game to take back home. The forest was beautiful, with tall trees and leaves of every shade of orange and brown. We had rented a small cabin deep in the woods, a cozy place to rest after a long day of hunting. Our first day in the forest was eventful. We spotted some animals, but they were too quick, and we couldn't get a good aim. Frustrated but undeterred, we returned to the cabin as the sun dipped below the horizon. That night, as we settled in, things took a strange turn. We heard unusual sounds outside, like branches breaking and rustling in the underbrush. It was unsettling, but we brushed it off as the wind playing tricks on us. After all, we were in the wilderness. The next day, we decided to split up, hoping to increase our chances of success. I followed a well-worn path deeper into the forest. As evening approached, I made my way back to the cabin. That's when it happened. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a massive creature emerging from the trees. It was unlike any animal I had ever seen. Its fur was dark and matted, and its eyes gleamed with an unsettling intelligence. I could hear a low, menacing growl emanating from it. Fear coursed through my veins, and I began to run back to the cabin. But no matter how fast I sprinted, the creature seemed to follow me with ease, always lurking just beyond my line of sight. I could hear its growls getting louder, closer, and panic set in. With trembling hands, I turned and fired a couple of rounds from my rifle in the creature's direction. The shots echoed through the forest, and for a moment, everything fell silent. The creature let out an anguished howl, and for a moment, everything was still. I watched as it retreated into the shadows, disappearing among the trees. My heart was pounding, and I realized I had to make it back to the cabin, to the safety of my friends. I sprinted the rest of the way, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Bursting into the cabin, I found Mike and Lisa huddled together, their faces etched with concern. They had heard the shots and the creature's eerie howl, and they knew something was terribly wrong. I quickly recounted what had happened, the menacing creature that had pursued me, the terrifying growls that seemed to reverberate through the forest. Mike and Lisa exchanged worried glances but reassured me that we were safe inside the cabin. That night, sleep eluded us. The forest seemed to come alive with eerie animal sounds, unlike any we had heard before. It was as if the very woods were conspiring to keep us on edge. Every rustle of leaves, every distant hoot of an owl, sent shivers down our spines. Morning brought little solace. We decided to follow the path I had taken when I encountered the creature, hoping to find some trace of it, perhaps footprints or blood. But as we combed the area, there was nothing. It was as though the creature had vanished without a trace. We spent the day hunting together, but our minds were preoccupied, and our shots went wide. The forest that had once seemed inviting had become a place of unease, and our camaraderie had turned into anxious glances. As evening descended once more, we made a unanimous decision. We packed our belongings and decided to cut our hunting trip short. We couldn't shake the feeling that the forest held secrets beyond our comprehension, and it was a fear we were not willing to confront any longer. The journey back to civilization was tense and quiet, filled with the unspoken knowledge that we were leaving behind an experience that would forever haunt us. The story of the creature in the woods became one we would share with others, a tale of the unknown lurking in the heart of the forest. And though we returned to our normal lives, the memory of those haunting growls and the pursuit of an enigmatic creature remained with us, a story we would never forget. I've been hunting these woods for years, and I thought I knew every inch of them like the back of my hand. But one day, something changed. I headed out into the wilderness like I always did, rifle in hand, ready for another successful hunt. The forest was serene, and the rustling leaves and chirping birds were my only companions. As I ventured deeper into the woods, an unsettling feeling washed over me. It was like an invisible pair of eyes were watching my every move. I brushed it off as nerves and continued on my path, determined to bring back a good catch. Hours passed, and the feeling of being watched never waned. It was as if an unseen presence was stalking me through the trees. I started to feel paranoid, my heart pounding in my chest with each step. That's when I heard it, a low growl that sent shivers down my spine. I turned slowly, and there, just a few yards away, was the source of my unease, a massive bear. It was unlike any bear I had ever seen. Its fur was jet black, and its eyes seemed to pierce right through me. Fear gripped me as I remembered tales of these legendary black bears, rumored to be smarter and more cunning than the average bear. My rifle trembled in my hands as I tried to take aim, but the bear was too quick. It vanished into the dense underbrush before I could pull the trigger. Panic set in as I realized that I had no choice but to run. I sprinted through the woods, heart pounding in my ears, my footsteps echoing in the silent forest. But no matter how fast I ran or how far I went, I couldn't shake the feeling that the bear was still behind me, just out of sight, always watching. As night fell, I knew I couldn't risk making camp on the forest floor. I climbed a tree, shivering with fear as I huddled on a thick branch, rifle clutched tightly. Below, in the darkness, I could hear the bear's heavy footsteps and occasional growls. It was relentless, waiting for me to come down. That night, I hardly slept, my eyes darting around, searching for any sign of the bear. It was a never-ending nightmare, and I couldn't wait for the morning light to come. Morning finally arrived, and I descended from my refuge in the tree, exhausted and terrified. The woods seemed different now, as if the trees held dark secrets and the shadows concealed hidden threats. My camp felt like a distant memory, and my only goal was to escape this relentless pursuit. I trudged on, my rifle always at the ready. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent my heart racing. The bear was still out there, somewhere, its presence an ever-constant reminder of my vulnerability. As the day wore on, I tried to outsmart my relentless pursuer, doubling back and zigzagging through the forest. But the bear always seemed one step ahead, always just out of sight, as if it knew my every move. With each passing hour, my fear and exhaustion grew. I knew I couldn't keep this up much longer. I needed to reach my camp in safety before the bear's relentless pursuit pushed me to my limits. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I stumbled upon the familiar clearing where my camp was set up. Relief washed over me as I realized that I might finally escape this nightmare. I hurriedly packed my belongings, my hands trembling, and my eyes darting around in search of any sign of the bear. But the creature remained elusive, leaving behind no clues, no traces of its presence. It was as if the bear had never existed, as if it were a specter haunting my every step. The absence of any evidence, any blood or tracks, only deepened the mystery and terror of the situation. With my camp packed, I made a break for it, running as fast as my tired legs could carry me. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees casting eerie shadows that played tricks on my mind. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of my vehicle, and even then, I dared not look back. When I finally returned home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had encountered something otherworldly in those woods. I told my friends and family the story of the relentless bear, but deep down, I knew it was more than just a bear. It was a creature of the wild, something ancient and mysterious that had chosen me as its prey, and I had narrowly escaped its clutches. To this day, I can't explain what happened out there in the woods, but one thing is for sure, I'll never forget the feeling of being hunted by a force beyond my understanding. I've always been an avid hunter, spending countless weekends in the woods with my trusty rifle. But there's one hunting trip I'll never forget, a bone-chilling experience that still sends shivers down my spine. It was a crisp autumn morning when I set out into the dense forest, my boots crunching through the fallen leaves. The woods were quiet, almost eerily so, with only the occasional rustling of leaves in the breeze. I had heard rumors of a legendary buck in these parts, a massive deer with antlers that could rival any in the record books. I was determined to track it down. As I ventured deeper into the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there. I brushed it off as nerves, chalking it up to the anticipation of the hunt. Hours passed, and I finally spotted the majestic buck in a clearing ahead. My heart raced as I raised my rifle, taking careful aim. Just as I was about to squeeze the trigger, the buck turned its head, locking eyes with me. But it wasn't the deer's gaze that sent a chill down my spine, it was what I saw behind it. Standing in the shadows of the trees was a figure, tall and unnaturally thin. Its eyes gleamed with a malevolent glint as it watched me, and I couldn't make out any distinct features. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, but when I looked again, it was gone. Shaken but determined to claim my prize, I fired at the buck. The shot rang out through the forest, and the deer fell to the ground. But as I approached the fallen animal, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As I stood over the downed buck, a wave of unease washed over me. I couldn't shake the eerie sensation that I was still being watched, even though the mysterious figure had vanished into the woods. Shivers ran down my spine as I knelt down to inspect my prize. To my astonishment, the buck's antlers were unlike any I had ever seen before. They were twisted and gnarled, almost grotesque in their appearance. I felt a growing sense of dread as I realized that this was no ordinary deer. Something was deeply wrong with this creature. I decided to make a hasty retreat, hoisting the deer onto my shoulders and making my way back through the woods. The forest seemed different now, more sinister. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had intruded upon something ancient and malevolent, something that didn't take kindly to outsiders. As I trudged through the underbrush, I began to hear whispers, faint and unintelligible at first. It was as if the very woods themselves were murmuring secrets that I was never meant to hear. I quickened my pace, desperate to put distance between myself and whatever unseen forces were at play. The whispers grew louder and more insistent, like a chorus of voices just beyond the edge of comprehension. I stumbled and fell, dropping the deer in the process. My heart pounded in my chest as I scrambled to my feet, leaving the twisted buck behind. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees pressing in from all sides. I could hear the whispers now, clearer than ever, and they seemed to be forming words, a language I couldn't understand. Panic set in as I realized that I was utterly lost, trapped in this nightmarish realm of shadow and sound. Hours passed, though it felt like an eternity, and I eventually stumbled upon a familiar path that led me out of the woods. I emerged, battered and shaken, into the fading light of day. I never did find out who or what had been watching me that day, and I never ventured back into those woods again. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something otherworldly in those haunted woods, something that should have remained hidden, and something that would haunt my nightmares for years to come.